Yom Kippur is a day of grandeur. It is a day, as we just heard, of majestic melodies, of penitence and prayer. It is a day of extremes, life and death, success and failure, wrongdoing and repentance. For these next 25 hours, we separate ourselves from earthly desires, for food, for sex, for cute outfits. We dress, traditionally at least, in white, imagining the burial shroud that all of us will one day wear. We'll recite over and over again the vidui, an unburdening of wrongdoings that are meant to be among the last words we say in our lives. We chant the words, "Who shall live and who shall die," contemplating the state of our lives and the state of this world. And we imagine a world and a self that is different, better even, than we are right now. Rabbi David Bashevkin writes, "On Yom Kippur, we make all sorts of promises about how we're going to change, promises to avoid sin, promises to transform our mundane lives into something loftier, something transcendent. But here's the thing about promises. They are almost always broken." He says, "My life is littered with the shards of broken Yom Kippur promises." Because like all good things and all intense things, 25 hours from now, Yom Kippur will, I promise, come to an end. And after it all, after the prayers and supplications, the confessions and admissions, after the final shofar blast is heard and the bagels are eaten, then what? It is no coincidence that the shortest span between holidays is from Yom Kippur to Sukkot. No coincidence that we move almost immediately from our most metaphysical holiday to our most embodied day. Long before we launched the building of the Aaron Milken Center, breaking ground in November, the book of Exodus tells of the building of the Mishkan, the Tabernacle, our holy and portable sanctuary that our ancestors carried and protected and celebrated in the wilderness. Vayakel et ha'am, gather the people, Moses commands, before launching into the architectural instructions at the end of Exodus. When does all of this happen? According to tradition, it is the day after Yom Kippur. So having descended from the mountain, from the high of his spiritual experience with the divine, from the actual heights, Moses hands the Israelites an IKEA manual and tells them to get to work. And now, millennia later, the very last mitzvah of Yom Kippur, the last obligation that we will have on this sacred day, is to begin to erect the sukkah. So tonight, as Yom Kippur begins, we are meant to experience that spiritual high. We will be asked to imagine the future, to draw out our hopes and dreams, and also to claim accountability, even now, for the ways that we will stray from those. Yom Kippur is an exercise in living in the imagined future. And in the imagined future, we can be perfect, we can be pure, we can be potential unlimited. But we can't stay in the imagined future. So Yom Kippur is also intended to set the stage for Sukkot. It is supposed to say, now that you have dwelled in this future, with all of its fears and all of its hopes and all of its potential, you have to live in the present. Now that you've imagined this perfect world, you need to dwell in the real one. And now that you have visited eternity, now you need to dwell in the moment, even, maybe especially, if the moment is uncomfortable. Sarah Wildman knows uncomfortable moments. She is a writer and an editor, and in November 2019, she added another title to her crowded resume, Cancer Mom. Her then 10-year-old daughter was diagnosed with liver cancer. As a writer, she shared pieces of the journey along the way, most recently in a piece entitled, "I Don't Need My Life to Be Remarkable." And sharing the details of this particularly challenging summer, she writes, "All summer, through subsequent radiation and tumor marker numbers that stubbornly refused to fall, even a nightmarish ICU stint in a resort town, I tried to live in what I began to think of as the hyper-present. It wasn't that I no longer worried about what might happen in a month or 2 weeks or next year. Far from it. It was that I could only really focus on the minute I was in." Sukkot is, more than any other holiday, more even than Yom Kippur, a holiday of vulnerability. It is our holiday lived in the hyper-present. It is the courage to build a structure that might fall down and will definitely come down. It is to say, after the permanence of the life and death on Yom Kippur, we are going to sit in the rain and the wind, or I guess here, the blistering heat, and we are going to be happy. Somewhere in my photo boxes is a picture of the first sukkah I ever put up. If I'm being honest, I actually supervised while Ben and our friend Adam put it up on a windy, rainy October day. We used to have those in Beverlywood. I am pretty sure that sukkah did not actually survive the night, but the memory and that laughter did. V'samachta bechagecha v'ayita ach sameach. These words from the book of Leviticus close out the instructions for the celebration of Sukkot. You shall rejoice in your festivals, and you shall be ach sameach. It's usually translated as nothing but happy, but let me suggest another possibility. Ach can also mean but. It can mean despite it all. Ach might be, I am happy in this hyper-present, in this moment. I am happy despite my pain. I am laughing with my tears. I am celebrating within my sorrow. It feels almost too simple. Faced with the existential questions of Yom Kippur, faced with our own suffering, our own losses and despairs and brokenness, you are telling me that our grand tradition says go outside in a hut and be happy? How can that be the answer to someone in deepest darkness? Because the command to be ach, only, even, but, sameach, appears only during Sukkot. That is the wisdom. Not Passover when we're gathered around a table with friends and family, not Shavuot when we stand together to receive Torah, not Rosh Hashanah, the birthday of the world, no. The command is given on Sukkot when we are sitting there exposed out in the open. It seems no coincidence that we must be able to be joyful, that we're obligated to be joyful when the rain is falling or the sun is pounding, when we are at our most vulnerable, when the very structure surrounding us could collapse, will collapse. Because that is the message of Yom Kippur, of these holy days. It is the words we just heard of Kol Nidre, the reminder that promises can be broken, that we can, even when we try our very best, let ourselves and our loved ones and our God down. It is in the words of the Vidui, which we'll chant in a moment, our repeated confessional, the reminder that relationships can collapse, that we can, with words and missteps and betrayals, tear down our marriages, our families, our friends. And it is in the words of the Unatana Tokef, chanted tomorrow, the reminder that our lives can collapse, that we will, be it this year or next year or, God willing, 50 years from now, face disease and discomfort and ultimately death. In the reminder that our world is on fire and underwater, in the reminder that stuff, our most important stuff, our bodies, our homes, sometimes our dreams, are going to break. It is inevitable. It will happen without warning and frequently. Yom Kippur is a real party. And then along comes Sukkot to teach us to live in the brokenness, and not only to live in it, but to find joy even, maybe especially there. So Sarah Wildman continues to describe her summer, and she says, after so many trips to intensive care, dashed plans, and other disappointments, The future felt too full of uncertainty to sufficiently map out, and worrying just undermined moments that were calm. I began to focus in a way I never had before on this evening's light, the feel of the sand today, the walk to the pier, the taste of the afternoon's ice cream. I don't assume that all of you have seen the movie Frozen 2, but I highly recommend it. Alongside a delightful soundtrack, it is a deep meditation on love, loss, grief, and memory, not unlike Yom Kippur. In particular, there's one scene that has stayed with me. Anna, one of the main characters, is stuck in a cave, fearing her sister is dead and that her best friend is dying right in front of her. Alone and frightened, she remembers advice given to her earlier, that when she is not sure what to do, she should do the next right thing. And it's hard. It's really hard to sit in total darkness and imagine light. And yet that's what we're called to do. Maybe often, but certainly on Yom Kippur. We move from the very edge of mortality into the next right thing. A celebration of abundance, of family and friends, of light and wind and sun and rain. Why not that? A friend responded when I shared my concerns about simplicity with him. Isn't it possible that in the midst of the chaos and the darkness and the despair, the act of dwelling in a sukkah that we build with our own two hands and eat food with people we love and find a little joy is a radical act of hope and faith? He continued, hearing your invitation that joy can come from simple things I'm capable of doing and creating gives me some hope. So maybe it is too simple, or maybe it is just that simple. The mystics tell a story of a musician struggling with his work who asks of a sage, what is the secret to a life of fulfillment and joy? Taking a deep breath, the sage responds with appropriate gravitas, wood, wire, and nails. Disappointed at best, the musician asks again, what is the secret to a life of fulfillment and joy? And again, the sage responds, wood, wire, and nails. For years, the musician continues to practice and play, performing around the world and pondering what the sage could possibly have meant, and still not understanding. Until, hours before a major concert, her instrument breaks. And as everyone gathers around wondering what to do, the musician turns to them and with realization dawning, asks for wood, wire, and nails. The simplest materials to build an instrument, the simplest materials to build a life, the simplest materials to build the next right thing. Stuff is gonna break. It's inevitable. Tonight and tomorrow we recite the litany over and over again, reminding us that it will happen without warning and frequently. And then, when Yom Kippur is over, we build. And then we rebuild and rebuild again. And in the brokenness and in the rebuilding and in the wood and wire and nails, if not joy, if not meaning, if not fulfillment, we find the next right thing and the one after that. Gemar Chatima Tova, may we all be sealed for a year of building and breaking and rebuilding.